For a little bit there, I thought this series was becoming redundant. Hey, let's pick on companies that do us wrong. Oh look, 2017, yeah, that's not a lot of spam. But things seemed to settle down when these money-hungry corporations realized there was only so many times they could take a dump on our dreams before we had enough. And after screaming loud enough, it seems things went right back to normal. Or did they? You see, we tend to think we've changed things once that grace period hits, when we don't hear our favorite YouTubers or the media complaining about the next big way the game industry is trying to screw us over, but in reality, it's not typically due to a grace period. I know we like to think we're special, but typically this inactivity coincidentally coincides with the amount of time that no games have come out. Good thing we have Konami, right? See, Konami's been a problem for a long time, from the way they treat their employees to their unethical business tactics, even down to the video games themselves. If someone told me to describe Konami as if they were a person, I'd say someone who grinds up babies and snorts them like cocaine. Holy hell, Barry, what are you talking about here? Well, let me explain. Konami has easily been one of the worst companies to deal with for a while. Game reviewers always had troubles getting review copies of their games. If their games were given poor scores or Konami was ridiculed in the slightest, that person or publication was blacklisted. They always acted like those little game developers on Steam who didn't like the reviews, so they'd lash out, and since it was Konami, it was acceptable. I could go on for years about this company, but let's segment them to make it easier. Starting with the employees. One thing Konami's been ridiculed for is its abusive treatment of its staff, especially their most high-ranking developers. Employees would come forward anonymously so as not to lose their job and talk about the atrocities that go on, such as monitoring employees with cameras, logging their lunch breaks ruthlessly, demoting developers to janitors once they've outlived their usefulness, and assigning email addresses to employees that essentially reduce them to numbers. Nobody at Konami is to have a personalized email address, and when great ideas are presented by an individual through email, the idea is used without giving any credit to the meaningless number with which it came from. The funny thing is, when these working conditions were publicized to the media, other Konami employees came out appalled that the transgressions spoke of in these articles were so minor compared to what they would have talked about had they been interviewed. Imagine that! Being pissed off because the horrid things your coworkers go through isn't as bad as what the other side of the room has to deal with. Employees, part of a team, are also not allowed to talk to other teams even if they're working on the same game, and like I said before, if your job is done and you can't contribute to the team anymore, you clean toilets and mop floors, if you're lucky. Konami is most of the time just better off firing you outright. Now isn't that great? But those aren't specific examples, and most of this information again comes from sources who can't be confirmed due to again them wanting to remain anonymous. So let's give some examples that we can confirm. Hideo Kojima is the genius responsible for Castlevania, Silent Hills, and Metal Gear. When Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain was released, Konami wiped Kojima's name from the game, trying to sweep his involvement under the rug and take full credit for his work. Turns out Kojima was having some troubles with Konami, so Konami did what any publisher who doesn't care about its employees does, stripped his name from the game and cut ties with him altogether. Even to the point that when Metal Gear Solid 5 was receiving an award, Hideo Kojima was informed by a lawyer representing Konami that he would not be allowed to accept the award or even be present during the award ceremony. Yeah, Konami couldn't even tell them themselves, they had some lackey do it, and because Kojima was still under contract by Konami at the time, he legally had to comply. And it wasn't just Kojima. The amount of well-known, respected developers who left because of how they were treated is insane. Even more so the amount of people thrown out and not given a second look, no matter how integral they were. Like David Hayter, the voice of Solid Snake, the man who was there from the very beginning, cast out in Metal Gear Solid 5 because he wasn't as famous as Kiefer Sutherland. Really? That's all it came down to? But as bad as the employees have it, it's not done for the well-being of the consumer. That feeling that Konami simply doesn't care, it passes on to us as well. And this brings me to my second point. Us gamers. I want you to imagine a company who constantly craps all over the hopes and dreams of its fans. One that doesn't care. For example, a company who would promise a new addition to a beloved franchise and then fire the people working on it and take it all back. A company who would take all their timeless classics and instead of rejuvenating them, turn them into mindless gambling in the form of pachinko machines. A company that lists microtransactions on the feature of the back of its game boxes. A company that unironically includes horse armor as DLC in their video games. But I gotta tell ya, it gets even worse than that. Pro Evolution Soccer 2016 came out exactly when you might expect, September of 2015, and with that, there were two versions of the game, the Xbox One and PS4 version, and the PS3 and 360 version, but Konami thought about everybody and had a port made for the PC. The port, however, was from the Xbox 360 and PS3 version of the game. The graphics on the PC look substantially worse than the consoles of the generation, and to make it all worse, on the Steam page, Konami used gameplay footage from the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One version of the game. It was a blatant lie, but it doesn't stop there. They then hid the game in a bundle. Now this was odd because the bundle didn't add anything but the base game. What the bundle did do, however, was hide the reviews so that if you were interested in purchasing the PC version of PES 2016, you'd have no idea how utterly screwed you would have been. Today, PES 2016 is no longer available on Steam, but lucky for us, PES 2018 is, and you'd be a fool to think that game isn't littered with bugs. Credit where credit is due, the single player works. It's when you try to play online when the game reveals its ugly self. Now Barry, you might say, that was a lot of information, but what was it that tipped you over the edge? All of this happened years ago, and you're right. If all of this was so bad, I would have talked about it a long time ago, but recently, Konami released Metal Gear Survive. In this game, you can play with other players and try as hard as you can to build up bases, manage hunger, hunt and gather, and fight off zombies. Pretty much all the tedious stuff you've done before in those survival games on Steam that everyone was making a few years ago. So yeah, Konami took the Metal Gear name and plastered it to the most repetitive genre of the past few years, but it's not even close to bad yet. In most every game you play, you of course have save slots. You can make multiple characters. There are games with many different characters, with many different skills, and as a player, maybe you'd like to try them all out. In this game, however, you do have access to save slots if you pay $10. Yes, Konami has locked save slots behind a microtransaction. Actually, I wouldn't even call this micro. This is a lot of money for something that every game just comes with for free. They have a money system in this game called SV coins, and with those you can unlock the save slot. Is there any other way to get these coins? No. Konami did have a promotion where they gave these coins out every day you logged in, but it only lasted for a weekend, so people only ended up with about 120 coins each. You know how many coins you need to unlock the save slot? 1,000. Of course, these coins also allow you to level up your character faster, yada yada yada, turning the entire game into another pay-to-win lie. I can just imagine now a family purchasing this game for their kids, only for one to sit down and play it for a while, trade off, and then realize he can't start a character of his own. Konami, you used to make memories. You used to inspire. Tell me one person who doesn't know what the Konami code is. Name off the top of your head how many games used that code. You're not even a shell of what you once were. You're just dead. Konami is one of the best examples of anti-consumerism. It goes out of its way to do the wrong thing as often as it can. When it comes down to it, Konami isn't even worth taking a look at anymore. When a new game comes out, I won't even be inclined to see what it might be about. Most of Konami's real talent either took off or were fired, and a few of them even started studios of their own, and they're doing well. Back in its infancy, Konami took a mound of dirt and turned it into a mountain. They were on top for so long, with everybody raving with every release. But with how they've acted, the things they've done, they've really brought themselves down, and in a few years, I wouldn't be surprised if that roaring mountain is no more than a silent hill.